All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're here with Rancher Live, and I have a very special guest from Codefresh. Dan, welcome back. And we're going to be talking about what's going on with Argo CD and what's going on with Codefresh, because it's been a while since we talked. But welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks, Robert.
So, what is the latest and greatest with Argo CD? And as we're coming closer to KubeCon, I wanted to check in and see, what's the haps. We've had you on. We've done a couple master classes that have been very successful for the rancher community by Sousa. And so, what's the latest?
So there's a couple of things going on with Argo. Honestly, it's very busy all the time. There's always a lot happening. But Argo CD 2.10 just came out recently. And we just had a release, a bug fix release yesterday for 2.10. So that has a ton of features. There's a lot of improvements to application sets, which I know a lot of people have been waiting for.
Mm-hmm.
There's improvements to authentication. There's improvements to security. There's probably 70 different features that were added in this release, as well as 100 some odd bug fixes. So.
And this wasn't a major release. This was just a minor.
Yeah, we actually have kind of an issue with doing major releases in the Argo project. Unfortunately, we've gotten in the habit of just doing minor releases, and I think that it's something we've been talking about changing, because we did have one instance over this last year where we had a minor release that actually had some breaking changes in it, and should be a major release. Now, it was in the documentation that it was breaking changes, but I think we've gotten in a kind of a bad habit with not following Semver perfectly. So that's something that we're hopefully, that'll be an upcoming project, is getting us working properly with Semver.
So with that, that's interesting. So is that just part of the dynamics of working with an open source project with other teams and other people, and just like coordinating, what constitutes a major release, when someone could kind of say no or argue that?
Yeah, I think that, if you look at Argo CD, it's 2.10 right now, right? So we've done 10 releases under the version 2 moniker, and the difference between V1 and V2 was pretty significant. And so I think people looked at that, and a lot of the maintainers kind of felt like, well, like we really need to meet a bar to come out with Argo CD 3. That's going to be a PR event and this kind of thing. And it's probably the wrong mentality. And we just need to, so we've had some discussion about, like, what should the release cadence be? Because there are still people that are using Argo and they're 8 versions behind. Now, those are not supported releases, right? We only issue security fixes for the last 2 releases. So there's been some discussion about, like, okay, how does it work with security updates? What's the release cadence for how often we should have breaking changes?
Mm-hmm.
And so that hasn't been resolved yet, but I suspect we're going to end up on like an annual cadence for doing those kinds of things. If you look at, Kubernetes, it's still version 1, so I think we maybe took the bad example of Kubernetes and have been following that, unfortunately. So anyway, I think it'll be something that we fix. But the big news is obviously that we have a lot of cool new features in the project. And I mentioned application support. There's a really cool feature for doing server-side diffing, which is really interesting. So there's an issue where, the big superpower of Argo CD that I think a lot of people rely on, it's not just the UI, but the UI provides these rich diffs of what's in your source of truth versus what's live in your cluster right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that works really, really well. But there are some scenarios where you have values that the default value gets filled in. For example, if a cron schedule, if you set that field on a job, it actually has a default value to run over a certain time period. So if it's just set to a default, like a null value, it'll get filled in with the default value. And even though those 2 things actually are the same, they are syntactically different looking. So basically what this means is we can do a server-side diff. So we basically do a server-side apply dry run, and then we cache that. And that allows us to say, hey, you put in a null value, which defaults to this value, these are actually the same. These have the same meaning, and so they should be counted. The diff should take that into account, because otherwise you get into scenarios where you have like default values that produce a diff, even though there's actually not a real diff on the server. So anyway, that's maybe one that double clicking on that one, I'm not sure that was the most important thing, but definitely a great feature. And then the other obviously big thing that we're doing with Argo is ArgoCon. So that's coming up next month in Paris. It's going to be co-located with KubeCon. So if you're going to Paris, if you're going to be at KubeCon, be sure to come to ArgoCon. We have a huge lineup of end users and talks. I'm giving a talk with the New York Times with Luke Phillips from the New York Times on basically using application sets and how you can kind of explode those and push them to their limit and do extra dimensionality and those kinds of things. So that'll be a lot of fun, and we got a lot of end user talks, so that'll be awesome.
So I am hosting a co-located event, but I will be breaking away to stop in and say hi at ArgoCon, but I will not be taking a seat because I want to make sure that someone else can go and enjoy and take advantage of the full event itself. We'll put the link in the show recording. I don't have it here, but Dan will send it over.
Oh, yeah.
We'll put it over there. We want to make sure if you can make it to ArgoCon and it's something you're interested in, Dan will be there. Stop for a selfie, post it on Twitter. #name will be great. I'd love to see them. But we do have a question if you got a moment, and
Sure.
from someone from now we simulcast this or multicast this, I guess you would say, to multiple platforms. So off of LinkedIn, a gentleman has asked, how does the Argo GitOps work with Argo rollouts? It wasn't clear to me how a commit or a pull request to your GitOps turns into a blue-green rollout versus an Argo rollout. Now, this was confusing to me when I first looked at Argo. So maybe coming from you, we could kind of just shed a little light on that. I actually had to have my former coworker, Luke Wheela, who's done a lot of work with Argo, kind of explain this to me, and he did a pretty good job, but I'll let you.
Well, yeah. Then hopefully you can help me if I need it. But so the first thing to know between Argo rollouts and Argo CD is that they are actually two different projects. They're two different tools, and they can be used with or without each other. So Salesforce very famously uses Argo rollouts on tens of thousands of deployments, but they're actually not using Argo CD to deploy those. So you don't have to use Argo CD in order to be using Argo rollouts. The way that Argo rollouts works is it uses what's called a rollout object. So this is a custom resource, and a rollout object is literally the exact same as the deployment object, except it has a release strategy associated with it. So you can actually create a rollout and have it just reference an existing deployment, and it will just take over that deployment. So what it does is basically it'll take the deployment, and then based on the release strategy, you have like a blue-green deployment or whatever, and you can set up a release plan if you want, which would have steps in it. Like if you're doing a canary release, it would be like release to 50%, then run this analysis template, run these tests. You can do the same thing with the blue-green deployment, where it's like, roll this out and then run these tests and then release this on. But yeah, it basically will just manipulate, depending on what load balancer you're using, it will either just manipulate the number of pods that exist, or it will work with the whatever your ingress is to direct the traffic. And it works with pretty much every ingress. We have a cool plugin for Gateway API. So you can do your generic Gateway API, and then you don't even have to know.
I did not know you had a generic plugin. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, Gateway API is a cool tool because you can basically set up a routing to work in a generic way, and you don't actually have to care necessarily what ingress you're using, what networking you have going on. So yeah.
So the questions are rolling in here. There was one funny comment though. Someone said that Golang promised to always be version 1.x, and I just giggled because I'm like, yeah, like what happens when you're like 1.294.2? At what point are you just gonna roll? But the next question, if you got time, if you got a moment for it,
no, we're good.
is an Argo rollout a superset of Argo CD? And I don't believe that's the case.
No, they're separate. So a rollout, like I said, is a custom resource that literally represents a Kubernetes deployment with the additional rollout features, right?
Mhm.
And if you're using it with Argo CD, it'll show you in Argo CD what's happening with your rollout, so that integration is there. But if you're not using it with Argo CD, I mean, you can literally just go and create a rollout in the Kubernetes API without having Argo CD installed. The rollouts controller, the Argo rollouts controller, will take over the job of routing and updating and stuff. So if you haven't done it, definitely recommend doing the learning.codefresh.io. We have a really cool training and certification there, and it will take you maybe a day or two, and you'll get a rollout out and get a deployment out. And the very first set of lessons includes creating your first Canary and Blue-Green deployment.
Hold on, https://learning.codefresh.io. I will put that in the chat, making sure everyone sees that. That will go through everywhere but Twitter. I will get that on a Twitter so people know. I've been there. I've explored it. I've done 2 courses, so it's been it's fun. I think it's where it got me kicked off with what with Argo CD, and I'm like,
you did it with your wife, I think, right?
I attempted to, but it failed miserably with her, so I kind of continued solo and quietly.
Because I think she needed to learn Kubernetes at the same time was the situation.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, and when you're trying to teach your spouse what you do for a living, there's nothing harder in life. I will say that. I will. If you have to teach your partner what you do on a daily basis, it is not the easiest thing. I think it would have been better if I brought my 11-year-old son or daughter to that. I think it would a little bit easier than the arguments that happened. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah. And I always, we have Rancher Academy, and having a place where I can go, and it was well put out. I have to admit, the courses there has inspired me to make changes on Rancher Academy. So it's very well put together. So very well worth your time and money to go over and check out what's going on over there at learning.codefresh.io. So we have co-located event, couple speaker spots. Anything else that we want to kind of hammer out before?
Yeah. So you asked you asked about what we might be showing off at KubeCon.
Mm-hmm.
So might be worth just taking 1 second. So Codefresh, for people that don't know, we make an enterprise version of the Argo suite. So not just Argo CD and Argo rollouts, but also Argo workflows and Argo events. And we basically have, we demoed at the last KubeCon the ability to do environment management. So actually, maybe I can even just share my screen.
You can. I'll bring it up.
Let's see if it gives me any grief here. Okay, so check this out. So this is inside of Codefresh. So I've got, if you've used Argo CD before, I mean, this will look very familiar. Like I've got all my apps here, and I can do all my apps and my deployments, and I can monitor my pods and check the logs and all that kind of stuff. And people have probably seen, most people have seen a demo of Codefresh. If you go into an app, similar to Argo CD, just the community version, you have all this view of what's going on. But we also introduced the concept of a release timeline, so you can view all the deployments that have happened, and then we associate what binaries were updated with what pull requests were merged, what CI builds, what the commit information was, what the Jira issues are that were being worked on. So all that kind of stuff is there. But what we demoed at this last KubeCon was the ability to create linkages of applications between environments. So here you can see, like, I've got my accounts application is represented in multiple environments, right, in staging and production. Because we all go through this process of, I have something in QA, I want to move it to staging, I want to move it to production.
Yeah.
And what we can actually do here is we can do real-time drag and drop between different environments to create diffs in real time. And so this one, it's going to run a diff. And I think in this case, there's probably like an image is different. There might not be anything different. I didn't check with this one.
Okay.
And then you can create a pull request or commit it to make the change. So we'll be demoing that So yeah, here you can see it. There's just an image difference, and you can customize the diffing just like you would with Argo CD applications. You can customize the diffing in a promotion. What we're going to be demoing in Paris, just to show you, and this is just a picture. This isn't a live demo that I'm going to show you, but this is the ability to do the ability to stage out your changes. Oh, you're not. Share this tab. Here we go. So this is, I have multiple environments, right? So I have one for staging, I have a US East, I have an EU, and this can represent hundreds or thousands of Kubernetes clusters. An environment isn't a single Kubernetes cluster. It could be a mix of Kubernetes clusters and namespaces and whatever. And you can actually model out the promotion of all your workflows. And all of this, you have promotion jobs that can run and post-promotion jobs that can run. You can run tests and stuff and have it automatically roll back, but you can model out your entire promotion workflow and all of that diffing that I talked about for promoting applications between environments is there. And it's super powerful. So you can automate all of that. So we're going to be showing that off at Paris, and excited to share that
now,
with the community.
Can we, let's say we build it out and just like data center 1, and we want that same workflow to be in data center 2. Is it's like exportable, so I can just say, hey, let's get this working, this is our workflow, this is how we want it to move, and then could it be moved or transferred to a different environment, like an entire, I always think BDR, like if it had to be recovered, the easiest way is obviously could be from, your disaster recovery plan, but you could just pull it from GitHub or wherever you're storing your source and, deploy it that way.
So everything here that's represented is actually a Kubernetes custom resource, and it's committed to Git by default, right? So the whole Codefresh UI, like everything here is essentially a front end for Git where we're committing or making pull requests for any changes that you make. The same thing is true of this environment management and promotion flow. But what's actually really powerful about this is most people that have used Argo CD are used to you install Argo CD, you add several clusters, and you're deploying stuff and you're managing it there. This environment promotion workflow is across any number of Argo instances. So what we're showing here is instead of thinking about Argo instance, cluster, application, instead think of environments, and environments could be several clusters, right? US East, for example, right here. Let's say that this flow that I'm looking at, let's say that I'm Pizza Hut or Chick-fil-A or Starbucks or whatever, and I have a Kubernetes cluster in every store. US East represents a region, but there might be 50 Argo instances connecting to 50 different local clusters in these different stores for that region. Or it could be 500 or 1,000 or whatever. So instead of thinking about it at the cluster level, you're actually thinking, oh, I have this kind of environment level, which is US East, maybe thousands of clusters, right? And locations. And they're all going to be operating with some independence. But through this flow, I can orchestrate all of them at once. And this is all actually in Git, and it's a custom resource in Kubernetes. And so if I wanted to duplicate it or modify it or tweak it, I mean, it's code. I can do that. It's easy.
Awesome. We're almost at time, but I have a question from my son. Are you guys handing out little octopus stuffies this year? And if not, it's okay. But my son's been begging me for one. Because I have the sticker, and he's just like, I know there's the stuffy dad. I'm like, I'll ask. But if you do.
I know that Intuit. So Argo is a project that we maintain with Intuit, Red Hat, and some others. I know that Intuit will have a stuffy.
Okay.
There's a chance there might be some stuffy situation going on. We'll definitely have some cool Argo swag, but stay tuned. We'll see what we can pull out of the hat.
Awesome. So thank you for giving us a taste of what's going on at the booth. Obviously, if you're going to be at KubeCon Paris, stop by the Codefresh booth to get the full demo. It's probably going to last a lot longer than the few minutes that we had here. We have ArgoCon, which is it the Monday or Tuesday? Are you guys Tuesday?
It's I think all the day zero events are Tuesday. Yeah, because KubeCon is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
I know they changed it on everybody, and we're like,
Yeah.
what day is what? So awesome. And are you going to be at Cloud Native Rejects? We're a sponsor. I will be there. If you are in town, love to see you.
This will be one of the first rejects that I miss, unfortunately, but I'm glad you guys are sponsoring it. It's a great event. If honestly, if people haven't been there before, it's very fun. You get to hang out with all the speakers in a much more intimate way than you would at KubeCon, and pretty nice.
It's you get a lot more questions answered. I've learned. You know, you could hear a talk, and sometimes the speaker just kind of disappears at KubeCon. Here, they'll have coffee with you, and I've had my questions answered, which is kind of like, you know, kind of seeing your famous people that you see on stage all the time. So it was kind of cool to see how that operates. So Dan, thank you ever so much. I will see you at KubeCon, and everybody else will see you guys in the community.